Anyone with slightest idea about research will understand this, that research is a very lonely journey. You spend a lot of time reading, you spend a lot of time at your desk, you spend an awful amount of time reflecting, thinking. But as you're thinking, as you're brewing over something, and it makes sense in your head, then that painful thing happens. Probably have to reply an email, or you have to run a household errand, and then what happens, that idea, that the thought that you had, it's gone. And it is, I don't know about you, but at least for me, it is a very painful experience, because thinking is hard work. It's really hard work, particularly when we're thinking in a very organized manner. We all know, if you're a PhD student, then you have some research question. That research question becomes your guiding mechanism to find out answers. But then at times that research question fails to guide you. It feels like you are in that zone of not knowing. And trust me when I say this, that we don't like to be in that zone of not knowing. And at least for me, what I have recognized, that I think faster than I can write. So just as any science is doing a lot of systematic work, and also good record. Record keeping is very important for doing any kind of research. So I came up with this idea that I'll start keeping my PhD journal. What is it? So this is how I am defining it for myself. If you have stumbled upon this video on YouTube, please don't subscribe to this channel. This is purely my PhD research, and I'm just keeping merely for myself, to keep a record of things that I'm thinking, to keep a trace of my own thoughts. So my research is about why people trust or don't trust science. To be more specific, I'm studying that at a time when the world is going through catastrophic consequences of climate change. The climate is changing rapidly, and the climate change has impacted food production around the world. So I'm located in Canada, and I'm trying to understand that how the Canadian Indigenous communities can maintain their food sovereignty. And empirical studies show that adopting agricultural biotechnology can make agriculture climate resilient. But Indigenous communities have a troubled relationship with science and social institutions around the world, and obviously in Canada. If I quote one of the very prominent Indigenous scholars in the world, Linda Smith, in her book, Decolonizing Methodologies, she writes that research is a dirty word in many Indigenous communities, because frankly speaking, that the techno-scientific practices, or in other words, settler colonial techno-scientific practices, have in many ways contributed in establishing colonial dominance in many places in the world. So science has in many ways contributed in colonial project. So we are at a crux, we are at a crossroad, that when Indigenous communities who can benefit from adopting agricultural biotechnology have troubled relationship with science, and for very valid reasons. So I am studying that what are the underlying factors that influences indigenous people's trust in agricultural biotechnology. So that's one of my key research questions. So I read voraciously. I read a lot of literature. I read varied kinds of documents, books, journals, interviews, policy documents to understand this troubled legacy. So I came up with this idea of keeping a PhD journal. What is it? So I'm going to speak my mind in front of the camera, and speaking is a way for me thinking out loud. As I have said in the beginning, that you spend an awful amount of time thinking and reflecting and reading and sitting at your desk. So what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to keep a record of my thoughts, keep a journal of my thinking process, so that as I progress in my PhD research, I can find out how my thoughts have evolved, or how my thoughts have interacted with the thoughts and research and studies done by many people. So through this process, I hope it will help me writing my PhD research, and probably be more concentrated, more rigorous in my PhD research. So this is my first PhD journal that I'm recording on July 7, 2023, sitting at University of Guelph graduate student housing. Let's see how it goes. So this is the first record.